Okay. That is working. So let me see if I can get the camera to follow me. Last time we were talking about the difference between art and science and whether or not everything was an art or a science that we teach on a college campus. And we decided that marketing was both. It's both an art and a science. And we thought that there may be a third category of stuff, which is called positive or pure logic, that we could teach on a college campus. And you can take courses in logic over in the Department of Philosophy. And abstract mathematics is an example of pure logic. It has no meaning in the real world, but it is a logic game that is consistent, and you can figure it out or solve it a priori, which means using the rational mind to ascertain the correct answer to these projects. There's a movie, a rather old movie now, called Good Will Hunting, where the janitor in that, played by, gone blank now, not Ben Affleck, his best friend Matt, is it Matt Damon that plays Good Will Hunting? Is that right? Yeah. Solves the logic puzzle that the professor has up on the board. So when we decide that we can study marketing as a discipline from a scientific perspective, that leads to the third philosophy and the third era of marketing thought. And that's the marketing era from 1960 to about 1990. And what distinguishes this era is the application of scientific principles to studying consumer behavior and figuring out what it is that people want as opposed to just what they will tolerate, because we now have the ability to produce things in such large quantities that it's no longer going to be acceptable to just have something that's a little bit better like the Ford Model T, which was you could have a Ford Model T in any color you wanted so long as that color was black, because people are not going to take that anymore. In Oklahoma, you should probably have, and all of my cars are this color, white. Why is that? Because white cars reflect the heat, and on days like today where it's going to be 105, black cars do what? Their heat sinks, and so they're really, really hot, so you might want white cars. So from about 1960 to 1990, we begin with the scientific study of what it is that consumers want. Now, in an era in which we can now mass customize products, we've moved beyond just the scientific aspect of studying behavior, and we've moved into what we call the relationship or the value co-creation era, in which we recognize that one of the things that we can do is we can provide consumers with products, and not only just products that are somewhat differentiated, small, medium, and large, but that are really based on what it is that they value. So an example of this would be my M&Ms. I like M&Ms. They're one of the few candies that I really enjoy. When I was a kid growing up, it was a big deal. I remember when they got rid of red M&Ms because the dye, it turned out, was toxic. And now, so M&Ms came in just a handful of colors. They got rid of the red because of red dye number 14 or something like that was toxic. But even after they brought it back, M&Ms came in blue and yellow and red and brown. And I think that may have been it. Green, maybe? M&Ms. They came in a cellophane package that was wrapped, a brown paper package that said M&Ms on them. And that's how you bought M&Ms. You bought them at the convenience store, the grocery store, things like that. You can now mass produce and mass customize these so that they're not just in those colors. You can get personalized M&Ms in any color you want. You don't have to buy them in cellophane packages. You can pick the colors that you want here. And move to the next thing. After you've done that, you can pick an image that you want, that you are going to put on your M&Ms. So you can do that, upload your image, you can put your face on M&Ms, whatever you want. Then you can choose how you want to have them packaged. If you're doing a wedding, historically speaking, like people at weddings threw threw rice. They no longer throw rice because it's bad for the birds, so they throw bird seed. But you can put them in little packages that look like they were rice packets at one point in time for your wedding with your, happy wedding day or whatever, Jim and Beth. And then you pass them out, whatever you want. And we can do this relatively quickly. So we now have an era in which it's not just studying the consumer and what they want that's going to be what we need. It's going to be engaging in an era in which we engage the consumer, not just finding out what they want, not just studying them like they are a subject in a lab, but figuring out what it is they want and engaging in what we call value co-creation in a relationship era in order to fulfill needs and wants. And so everything is becoming exceedingly differentiated in this era in which we can engage in mass customization. Dell was one of the first companies to do this. If you wanted a Dell, you called Dell and you bought the Dell, and they had computers and they had processors and storage and sort of a small, medium, and large, and then you decided what suite of packages you wanted with that, and then they would ship the computer to you. And it allowed for the disintegration or disintermediation of the market and the channel, and it allowed for people to get better customized products. And now we see this in almost everything. You no longer have to accept small, medium, large, extra large in terms of your t-shirts or anything else. You can go online, you can take pictures of yourself or have somebody else take pictures with your iPhone, and you can get mass customized jeans that are made to fit, or shirts or jackets or all kinds of things. And it's not all that difficult to do, and it's not all that time consuming. In the past, that would have taken a lot of time, but with advanced robotics and the ability to transport things in very, very quick manners, we can now engage in this beyond the scientific method of marketing and in this era of value co-creation. So if we're going to say that marketing is a science, and it's still important, because even though we're engaging in mass customization, we're going to have to use a scientific perspective to kind of figure out in the beginning what it is that consumers want, particularly if you're going to release a product that is completely novel to the market that people may not know that they want or need at this point in time. So we're still going to use a lot of science in marketing. And so what is the first step to establishing a discipline? Well, the first step is to define the domain. If marketing is a science, what makes it different from, say, the science of biology? What is the science of biology? What is the domain of biology? It is the study of, who said that? It's life. It's the study of life. So as opposed to chemistry, which is the study of how chemical agents interact, right? So what is the domain of marketing? Well, in order to say we're a science, we're going to have to come up with a definition. That's where we're going to start out with, is defining what it is that we're going to study. And so we've gone through, because we're a new scientific discipline, we have gone through several different iterations of what the domain of marketing is. The National Association of Marketing Teachers, which is the forerunner of the American Marketing Association, in 1935 reduced or come up with this definition, and they reduced the domain of marketing to these ideas. Marketing is the performance of business activities that direct the flow of goods and services from producers to consumers. Now, there's a problem with this definition. It's far too limited because, as I told you in the beginning or during the first week, that marketing is one of those things that it's the only fully integrated function of the firm. So we're going to engage in marketing for more than just producers to consumers. It's about more than that. So the domain of marketing expanded in 1948 and again in 1960 with different definitions. And finally, we get the definition that we have today. So in 1985, it said, marketing is the process of planning and executing the conception, pricing, promotion, and distribution of ideas, goods, and services to create exchanges that satisfy individual and organizational objectives. So now we're recognizing that it's not just producers and consumers, that there's an individual aspect to it. It's not just about companies, right? And one of the things that makes this class useful for you is that we're going to talk about how you can market yourself in here. We should probably start with social media In the early ages of social media, MySpace, which probably most of you have never heard of. Has anybody heard of MySpace? Okay, a few of you have heard of MySpace. I had students that would post things on social media and I'm like, oh my God, don't do that. Do not post the picture of you at the frat party, beer bonging 12 beers. Not a good look for your personal brand, because people will creep on your social media and they will hold that against you when you go to get a job, right? So it's more than just about organizations, it's now individuals. The current version says that marketing is the activity for creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that benefit customers, the organization, its stakeholders, and society at large. I think that's a pretty good definition. However, I would add this, and I believe this is a test question, so you might want to write it down because it's not in the book. According to me, we should begin the definition with marketing is a pervasive activity. We all do it constantly, whether we think about it or not. You engaged in marketing when you got up this morning and brushed your teeth and combed your hair and put on your clothing. Why? You want people to like you. If you showed up without doing those things, you were engaging in marketing. You bought products to do this, or you had them given to you by your parents or something like that in order to engage in marketing. You drove here in a product that was marketed to you. We engage in this constantly, whether we think about it or not. So marketing is a pervasive social activity. It's not just businesses that engage in it. It is everybody that engages in it. And it is used not just by business and organizations, but by governmental entities and people as a whole. You have a group of friends. You want to go out and see the latest movie. I don't know what's the latest rage movie out there. I don't tend to watch movies very much because I have the attention span of a gnat as a result of these devices that we all have connected to us called a cell phone. And so it's hard for me to sit through a movie anymore. But you want to go see a movie, you want your friends to go, you're going to have to sell them on the idea of going with you, because they're probably going to want to sit there and play on their phone and, I don't know, win Angry Birds or the final level of Farmville or whatever it is that you all are playing currently. So it's a pervasive activity that we do constantly. What is needed for marketing to occur? Well, it's a lot like when we talk about management and we say things like you can engage in time management, which is managing yourself. That's not really management. Management requires more than one person to manage, and you can't really manage time. The clock is ticking whether or not I want it to. And at 12:15, whether or not I'm done, you all will get up and leave. I can, work within those confines, but I can't really manage. I can't slow the clock down. Can I? Marketing is the same way. You can't engage in it on your own. You have to have somebody else. So there has to be at least two parties. That's the minimum number of people that you have to have for marketing. Anything less than that, and you're motivating yourself. You're not marketing. You have to have a desire and ability on each party's part to be satisfied. I have to have something. I want you all to talk to me, so I'm going to give you something of representational value, which is a duck, in exchange for points, right? It's valuable to me to have you talk. Why? Because I remember when I was in college and listening to lectures is just kind of boring, if that's all you do. I remember I had to take university physical science, and I put it off and put it off. I took biology course with the lab fairly early on, but I didn't want to take physical science because it was just boring. Like this whole, a train leaves Chicago and one leaves Dallas and they collide in Milwaukee. How far does the part, I don't care. Everybody's dead on the train. Why do the parts go? Well, that's physics, right? It's operating within like this realm. You have two competing forces collide, and you're going to have fallout from that. That's physics. How much damage? That's determined within precise limits, and that just seemed boring to me. And I had this professor, I'll never forget his name. His name was L. Witt Marks, and he could write with both hands. And he started at the dry erase board every day, and with both hands he was just writing formulas on the board. And then at the end of 50 minutes, it was a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, he would turn around and he would beam at us like he had done something. And maybe he had. It was like he had his own little math party up at the board, and he forgot to invite any of us to that. And it was lecture the whole time. It was boring. I started referring to him as half-wit because I'm like, do you know, like, you've lost, everybody's asleep in this room. So I'm going to give you something that you find of value, which is points for doing tests or responding and things like that. So we have two parties. We have a desire to be satisfied. Each of you wants to pass this class. I take it. If you don't, you can leave now because, you know, you're here to get a degree. And getting part of that degree involves taking this class, because I'm going to take it that almost everybody in here is a business major, and it's required. This class is required for business majors. You have to have it. It's also required for fashion marketing majors, right? You have to have this class. So you have a desire, I have a desire to teach you something, and we both want to be satisfied. You want points, I want you to react. So you have to have something of exchange. Exchange is central to marketing. We can exchange not just tangible things like ducks. We can exchange intangibles, ideas. Today is election day in Oklahoma. It's actually election day in quite a few places, not just Oklahoma. It's a primary day. You all, how many of you, I haven't got my vote, I went to vote yet sticker, but how many of you have gone to vote? Anybody? A couple of you? You did early voting, okay? So the candidates on today's ballot want you to vote for their ideas. They want to sell you a policy program based on their ideas in exchange for your vote. So the currency is not just necessarily money or barter, it's ideas. And a vote is something abstract. It's your desire to express your preference for who is going to lead the great state of Oklahoma for the next 4 years. Now, the Democrats have already chosen their candidate. So today's candidate election is a runoff primary between the top two vote getters in the Republican Party, and then there are two ballot initiatives, right? So it can be intangibles, like ideas, or things that you can't touch, taste, see, smell, hear, feel. Legal services. When you hire me as a lawyer, you don't want the piece of paper that I will come up with necessarily and file down at the courthouse. You want what that represents. It's the idea of the legal concepts contained in that. So you have to have something to exchange. Doesn't have to be tangible, but there has to be something. When you're marketing yourself to your friends to go to the movies, what is it that you, well, it's good feelings that you're exchanging. It's friendship that's exchanged, right? So you have to have something to exchange. If you have nothing to exchange, you won't have marketing occurring. All right. All of those things lead us to a discussion of strategies in marketing. When you employ these philosophies, a production philosophy, a sales philosophy, a marketing philosophy, or a relationship philosophy in your business, you're engaging in the first step of strategic planning. What is it that you're going to do? You all do this all the time. Again, when you're trying to influence your friends, you sit there and you think in your little brain, how do I get them to do what I want them to do? My friends, I have one friend who constantly likes to go to the movies. I don't like to go to the movies. I just cannot sit still that long. Why do I go? Well, he persuades me that this movie is going to be different. There are just not that many variations on themes out there. I mean, like every rom-com is the same story over and over and over again, isn't it? Boy meets girl, boy does something to lose girl, boy gets girl back. Like I've seen that. But I go because I know that at some point in time, I'm going to want him to do something that I want to do, right? Which usually involves some kind of power sport that he doesn't want to do. Like, go ride motocross, which is why I have a limp currently, because I was at the Stillwater 500 with my nephew and I took a jump and it turned out poorly for me and I laid the bike over on my ankle, even though I was wearing protective boots, right? But I want them to do things like that with me. And so I engage in strategic thinking about how I'm going to go about doing what it is that I want them to do, and they do the same thing. Now, in organizations, we want to do it more formally. So we're going to start with our goals. For you, what you all want to think about is what kind of goals do you have? Why is it that you're in this class at 11 o'clock on Tuesday and Thursday when you would rather be probably staring into your phone, figuring out where your friends are and what they're doing and how you can go meet them at, I don't know, Starbucks. How many of you like Starbucks? Oh, some of you have heard, I hate Starbucks. Like, Starbucks is the tool of the devil, so you're not willing to raise your hands, even though I know you all want to go to Starbucks. Tool of the devil. The devil has many tools. Starbucks is one of them. When I take students to competitions, I tell them there are two things that you can do that will like get me to punch you in the throat. Not really going to punch them in the throat. Mention Chick-fil-A, another tool of the devil, or Starbucks. I like either of those things will get you like a very visceral reaction from me. Both of those are tools of the devil. They should be avoided at all costs. So we're going to start with goals. You would rather be at Starbucks with your friends this morning rather than here. Why is it that you're here? Well, you have a goal. That goal is to get a degree. That's the ultimate goal. Yes, to get a degree. And in order to get that degree, you have to, who said it? Pass this class. That's part of the thing that you're going to have in order to get a degree. I take it in business or in fashion marketing. And so are there any other majors in here besides business or fashion marketing? Is there anybody from liberal arts? Yes. Why are you in this class? So it's a required course for arts administration. I didn't realize that we had that. And that's in the College of Fine Art and Design. And you have to come over here where we make fun of that college and endure this in order to get this degree that you want, which is your goal, right? So organizations like you have goals. Usually those goals, depending on the type of organization, are things like to make a profit. That's the biggest one that we deal with in the College of Business, is to make a profit. If you're an art administration, it may be to sell tickets to your art museum or figure out how, to gain donations so that you can continue. So what is a goal or an objective? Is something that you desire or something that the organization needs to fulfill its mission. Now, what is a good goal? Let's think about you individually. What is a good goal? Yes. Passing this class. Okay, That's maybe a good goal. Could it be a better goal? Yes. You have your hand up. What do you think? Yes. What's that? Getting a degree. Okay. That's also, I think, most of the reason you all are here. But is that a good goal? You had your hand up. What do you think is a better goal? Yeah, you. Getting an A in this class, that's a better goal. Why is that better than passing this class? Passing is bare minimum, right? Passing is bare minimum. You probably want something, sorry, did you get it? Here it is. You probably want something more, or you should want something more than just passing. So, or more than, for those of you that said getting a degree, well, how do we make that a better goal? Let's see, I think somebody over here had their hand up. Get a job from the degree? Okay. That may be better goal. You had, what were you going to say in terms of?
What you want to do first is you want to, pass your classes with good grades. Then build up from there. Pass your milestone classes, get your capstones done.
Okay.
Be good with the grades there. Then you get your degree. At that point, you'll be proficient in what you do.
Okay. So you want to go about getting the degree in the most efficient manner, right? Following the degree sheet. Okay. Before we start following the degree sheet, who has an idea of what's a better goal than just getting a degree? Okay, getting a degree in a field that you care about. I'm not sure that that's a great goal, but I'll give you a duck. The guy who did Dirty Jobs, Mike Rowe, was interviewed after he completed that series, and he said, the interviewer asked him, what did you learn from doing this series on these dirty jobs? Any of you seen that series, Dirty Jobs? And he said, the interesting thing that I learned from doing that series is that most of the people who owned these companies started out by working and building these companies up, and they started out doing the jobs themselves, and none of them would have said that that was their passion. We tell people in this country, go get a degree, follow your passion, and you'll never work a day in your life. Wrong. Most of us can't follow our passion. Nobody says, I want to rebuild septic tanks. And he went and he did this. But the guy who did that recognized a need in his community for somebody who did septic tank repair, removal, replacement. Nobody says, I want to do that when they're a kid growing up. But those businesses are necessary and they make a lot of money. We have a mythology in this country that says you can be anything you want. This is not a partisan statement. This is just a statement of fact. We look at people like Barack Obama, and the reason I use Barack Obama is because if you look at his life story, it's not somebody that you would think would become president of the United States. He was abandoned by his father. He has a crazy name, Barack Hussein Obama. We went to war against a guy whose name was Hussein. His mother decides to go get a PhD, and she basically abandons him then to his grandparents who raise him. Right? Not somebody that you'd think would become president of the United States, and he did. Twice. And we look at that and you say, you can be anything you want to be. Probably not. I wanted to be an airline transport pilot in the worst way my whole life as a kid. I had a grandfather who was an airline transport pilot. I started flying when I was 8 years old. I got my private pilot's license on the day that I was first eligible to get a private pilot's license. I turned 17 and I got a private pilot's license. By the time I went to college, I had 750 hours. I wanted to be an airline transport pilot. I graduated in 1992. The way you became an airline transport pilot at that point in time was you got jet time by going into the military and learning to fly heavies. That's transport aircraft, like the C-130. And in 1992, Bill Clinton was elected president. The Berlin Wall had fallen. There was basically what we thought was going to be a very peaceful world, and the military was downsizing. I couldn't become an airline transport pilot. I could not get a pilot slot, even though I had all of these hours in an aircraft before. There was just no pilot slots left. We weren't engaging in wars. That was before Gulf War I. That was before we had all of these other skirmishes. I couldn't get a slot. At that point in time in 1992, the simulators were not very good. They had some, but they weren't very good, and you couldn't get a lot of time in them. So you had to go into the military in order to be able to afford the jet time to get to the point that you could go and fly airline transports. So I had to go to law school instead. You can't necessarily be, I wanted that in the worst way, wasn't going to happen for me, right? So maybe a good goal is to find something that'll make money. If your goal is to get a degree in, I don't know, I shouldn't be critical, but musical theater, you're going to starve to death. I'm sorry. You might like to sing. I like to sing and dance. That's why I like karaoke. If you get on my YouTube channel, there's examples of me singing karaoke. It's horrific, right? But even if I were good at it, probably not going to make a career out of that. What's the percentage of people that can actually become, you know, Lady Gaga? Less than 1/100th of a millionth of a percent or something. You know, I mean, like, how many people? Not very many people do this, right? So maybe when we think about these goals, some of you have come up with these ideas that you want to get A's, as you write. Let's start with the degree. I want to get a degree in, and I'm going to give a shameless plug for my degree program, professional selling. Why? Because I have the only program on campus that can say we have 100% placement of our majors and minors, and 80% of our majors make over 6 figures in their first year. Most of you don't want to do professional sales. It's one of the hard parts of my job is recruiting students to convince them that they want to go be a professional salesperson. What they don't realize is that everybody's first job, for the most part, is in sales. Almost everybody. Your first job. How many of you are servers in restaurants? Quite a few. That's a sales job. It's convincing people that they want to try that special of the day, right? Or the latest cocktail that they've come up with at the bar or whatever. It's a sales job. So we want specific and objective goals. I want to get a degree in professional sales, or I want to get a degree in accounting, another degree where you're going to make some money. Now, the difference between accounting and professional sales is A, if you come and do my degree program, you'll stay awake. And B, you'll make a lot of money as an accountant, but you won't make as much as you do if you do sales. Sales is one of the few jobs where you can decide how much you want to make. And you could make it because it's commission-based. I have a friend, Adam, who worked for US Foods. And he's like, I decided I wanted to take my family to Disney World. And I figured out how much more product I had to sell every month in order. He wanted to stay on property at one of the exclusive resorts. He's like, I figured out I only had to sell one more case of meat a week in order to meet that goal. And he did. You can decide how much it is you want to make. In accounting, you're probably not going to do that. Get a good job, pay quite a bit of money, not going to be able to decide, I want to make more money. So I want to get a job in sales, or I want to get a job in accounting, or I want to get a degree, I'm sorry, not a job, a degree in finance or information systems. So we want specific, objective, measurable. How do you know if you've achieved the goal? Right? It's got to be measurable. How are you going to achieve this goal of getting a degree in professional selling, management, accounting, finance, fashion marketing, art administration? Well, when you get that piece of paper and you walk across that stage and you get that Bachelor's of Arts in Art Administration or the Bachelor's of Business Administration in Accounting, right? It's measurable. You can measure that, right? Then, most importantly, it has to be realistic. It's not that you shouldn't go for stretch goals. And it's not that businesses shouldn't try to shoot for something that is completely new and innovative, but you have to be realistic. When I decided that I was not going to become an airline transport pilot because I couldn't get a slot in either the Navy or the Air Force, which were the two branches of the service that flew heavies, started looking around for other jobs, right? Because as a young person, I became very concerned about my own mortality. Lots of us do this. We go through this sort of crisis of faith. And I wanted to know if you could prove or disprove the existence of God, which is one of the reasons why I was very interested in philosophy. I took a lot of courses in philosophy because I wanted to know whether or not you could come up with a proof for the existence of God. Is that realistic? It's really hard. It's measurable. You either come up with a proof or you don't. Really hard to do, right? Maybe not realistic. So we have to have specific. So what's a good goal? How do we make the goal of I want to get a degree in professional selling, accounting, art administration, management, finance, ISOM, things like that, more specific? I want to do it within what's a realistic goal at your point in time? I want to do it within 4 years, right? Can you do it in less than that? Maybe. My mother thought I was a slacker because I got my bachelor's degree in 4 years. My mother graduated from high school when she was 17, early, and she got a bachelor's degree in 3 years. And she started teaching high school when she was not much older, and she thought I was a slacker because I took 4 years to get a degree. Most of you will not get a degree in 4 years. Why? You have to work. School has become expensive. I was fortunate that when I went to school, the state of Oklahoma paid 80% of what it cost to educate me, and I paid about 20%. That's no longer the case. The state of Oklahoma pays about 20% or less, and you pay about what? 80%, which means that most of you probably have jobs that interfere with your ability to get 18 credit hours a semester. So specific, objective, I want to get a bachelor's of business administration in X, Y, and Z. I want to do it in this amount of time period, and that's realistic. So organizations, their goals are organizationally dependent on the type of organization that we have. So most of what we talk about in here, although most of what I'm going to try to do is relate this to your own life, so I'm going to talk about individual stuff, but we're going to talk a lot about as well for-profits. But they're not the only ones that use marketing and look at goals and things like that. We also have nonprofits like the American Heart Association, the American Cancer Association, the Red Cross that use marketing to try and help people with what it is that they do. The American Heart Association focuses on reducing the #1 cause of death among men my age, heart attacks. That's their goal. How do they do that? By funding research, right? By getting people to participate in those research studies, by getting donations that focus on these things. The American Cancer Society focuses on these things. Those are nonprofits. And then we have governments that also use marketing. Governments engage in customer services or voter services, right? And they use marketing to tell you about that. How is it that you find out whether or not, how is it that I decided that I wanted to get a career in the Air Force or the Navy? Well, they had recruiting posters to try and convince me that there were slots that were unavailable. I could get a job in the Air Force or whatever, but it wasn't going to be as a pilot. There were lots of other jobs that they had that I wasn't interested in, but they had recruitment posters. So they engage in marketing. And the goals that they have, so for a government, it's not necessarily about, getting cash. It's about providing services is their goal. Police, fire, protection. I am a city councilman for the great city of Guthrie, Oklahoma. This is the second time around that I've done this. I was a city councilman and vice mayor when I was 25. And when I turned 50, I became city councilman and vice mayor again for the second time. I'm almost through my term. I said after I did it one time when I was 25, I would never do it again. I don't know how I got talked into doing it again, but I did. So we provide fire, police, water, things like that, sewer, trash pickup, and we engage in marketing. We want people, for example, to dial 911 if there's an emergency. How do we do that? We put it on the sides of our police cruisers. In case of emergency, dial 911. We want to let you know when big trash day is in Guthrie so that you don't just have your stuff out at the curb all the time. So we put it on your water bill to engage in marketing. In terms of businesses, there are various types of for-profits. The course focuses, and the book focuses largely on the third, corporations, because authors who write textbooks can find good data for large corporations because these large corporations publicize this data because they're required to in filings with the SEC. And so we can get lots of data on how much they're spending on marketing and advertising and promotion and things like that. But the vast majority of you will go to work for smaller to mid-sized businesses, which may be a DBA, which stands for doing business as, or a partnership, or a limited liability company or a limited liability partnership or things like that. And so the way we organize these companies will also depend on how we engage in marketing and what kinds of goals we are going to be able to set for the organization. So we have long-term goals in terms of strategy. This is looking at things 5 years out. Now, lots of small to mid-sized businesses don't focus on long-term strategy because they're in survival mode. The vast majority of businesses will fail within the first 5 years or less of being in business. Why? Well, because they don't engage in good strategy. They maybe don't set specific enough goals. They project their own desires. You think that because you're interested in doing something, everybody's interested in doing something. I fly competitive aerobatics. I like to turn airplanes upside down. That makes most people sick to their stomach. If I thought that everybody wanted to do that, I might go broke by offering aerobatic aircraft for sale. Turns out not a lot of people want to do that. Why? It makes them sick. It's also frightening, to turn an airplane upside down for most people. I'm odd. It's why I get on a motorcycle with my nephew, in spite of the fact that I'm probably too old to do that at this point. Because when you fall, even if you have body armor on, it doesn't feel the same as it did when I was in my 20s, right? So long-term goals, things like Ford, GM, Tesla will engage in 5-year planning. Lots of small to mid-sized businesses forego long-term planning to their peril because they're focused on short-term and survival. So structural dimensions of planning. Are we talking about, and one of the things, because the text talks about it, and it's test questions, so I have to talk about, I said I'll talk about a lot in terms of you. If we're talking about long-term planning for you, it should be one of those things, and it's amazing to me how everyone other than my sales students is graduating from the College of Business, and I'll say, do you know where you're going to go to work? And the management students that I have that take some of my other classes and the finance students are like, have no clue. My sales students all know where they're going to go. Why? Because they've all had to do an internship in sales. I think I told you all, again, my shameless plug for my sales program, I have had more than one student that made $100,000 in their internship year, working at their internship. 6 figures. That goes a long way to paying for college, right? So at the corporate level, you're going to have these broad term structural dimensions looking at what is the future. Elon Musk looking at what is it that's beyond Tesla. Now that we've got this electric car, what's the next thing? How do we make that better 5, 10 years down the road? If you're a strategic business unit, so Elon Musk has not just Tesla, he has SpaceX, right? And these other companies, you know, those are strategic business units. And then planning can also be at the functional level. What is it that the department needs? So we just went through planning here in our department in marketing. So the university has goals, which is to increase enrollment, educate more students. The college has goals, which is to try and convince some of you that are in other fields that maybe you should consider at least a major or a minor, second major or minor in business. And then the department has goals that we think about. So the functional unit of planning. Long-term success. Collins and Parias, in a book called Built to Last, Successful Habits of Visionary Companies, say that the most successful companies, they looked at 18 companies, they had been established for nearly 100 years, they outperformed the market, and they had a core set of values. This is important to you. One of the things that will lead to your success as business people, or whatever your chosen profession is having a core set of values. Now, turns out, and we'll talk about ethics on Thursday, these values don't have to be good. Philip Morris, anybody know what Philip Morris does? What? They sell cigarettes. They manufacture and sell cigarettes. Was one of these companies that was built to last. Did you pass that duck? So thank you. They were described by Collins and Parias as being ruthless, cold-blooded. The CEO said, I see nothing wrong with selling people a product that they don't need. Cigarettes go beyond a product that you don't need. None of us need an iPhone. We may want an iPhone, and that want may not be rational. That desire, that goal to have an iPhone. In fact, it's probably not. One of the things that they've done is they've done studies on young people, and when they get their first phone, all of them want an iPhone. Do you know why they want the iPhone? Because they don't want to be the message that shows up on their friend's phone as something other than iPhone Blue. iPhone has marketed that feature as being, why do you care? But your friends know if you're the one in the group that is not an iPhone user. And it matters to them. So Philip Morris said, you know, we see nothing wrong with selling people cigarettes, a product that they don't need. It's not just that you don't need it. There's no benefit to that product. In fact, it's not just that you don't need it, it's harmful to you. As somebody who smoked for a long time, I can tell you, it's hard to quit. It's highly addictive. And not only is it you don't need it, smoking is one of the leading contributors not only to lung disease, but to what? High blood pressure, heart attack, heart disease. Men who smoke have higher rates of prostate cancer, breast cancer. All kinds of things are tied to this. So it's important, what we try to have is good goals or good values along with these ideas that we have. Mission statements are important. What is it that we do? Theodore Levitt, in a seminal work called Marketing Myopia, talks about this. A lot of times we become focused on so much of the small detail that we fail to see the bigger picture. And he talks about this. If you went back to the beginning of the 20th century, for example, the largest companies in the United States were railroad companies. Why? Because transportation was enormously important. Logistics studies are one of the foundational disciplines in marketing. It's the part of marketing that nobody thinks about. How do we get goods from producers to consumers in the most efficient way? And those studies were born out of agricultural economic universities, ag econ, and looking at how you get highly perishable products from producers in places like Iowa and Wisconsin and cheese to people that want them that are not located in those places. And so the railroads were enormously important in this at the beginning of the 20th century. Are railroads the largest companies today? No. Why? Well, because they failed to see the larger context, which is they were really good at running railroads. They weren't very good at recognizing that what they were really in was transportation. And they got overtaken by other things. As outsourcing became more and more prevalent, 90% of everything that we touch, taste, feel, and consume comes to us at some point in time by container ship. 90% of everything. Almost everything that you touch or use in a day will come to us on a container ship at some point in its journey. So it's understanding multimodal transportation and logistics. Yes? Railroads are still important, right, in terms of transportation, but they had the opportunity to diversify, right? It's one of the things in finance that they'll tell you that, there's sort of two strategies, and the one that most finance people will tell you should focus on is diversification of your portfolio. As an individual, when you go in and you start, investing and getting a stock portfolio as part of your 401k or 403b, you should diversify your portfolio. Why? Well, because if you have all of your eggs in one basket, these are trite things to say, right? When that basket starts to fail, you have not managed your risk. And so when other industries like shipping became more dominant, they hadn't diversified their portfolio. So could they have? Yeah. Lots of shipping companies, by the way, are strictly involved in shipping. Not necessarily Maersk, which is an intermodal transportation company, but a lot of them. Could something replace that? Yeah. As air travel becomes even cheaper, I mean, the reason that we ship a lot of stuff on ships is because it's cheap, right? So the Boston Consulting Group comes up with a portfolio analysis to determine, as part of your growth strategies, whether or not you have, it's a 2x2 matrix, whether or not you have high growth in terms of market potential, and then whether or not you, as a business, are in a position where you have a large percentage of market share. So if you have high market share and high growth potential, you have what they call a star. This is where you want to be. Now, the thing is that things happen quickly. In the cellular field, for example, when I got my first cellular telephone, it was manufactured by Motorola. Motorola is a company that most of you have never even heard of anymore. They were the first big manufacturer of telephones. Why did they lose out? Because their star, they didn't continue to update, and they got overtaken by Apple, which decided that we would, I mean, this device is no longer really a mobile phone. We don't really talk on it. Most of you don't want to answer the phone. I don't want to answer the phone anymore. We text. This is actually more like a pocket computer that has a feature that most of us don't use anymore because we use it for other things like social media, finding where our friends are, getting information, Googling stuff, right? And so they were committed to phones, and they got overtaken by Apple and some of the others. If you have high growth potential and low market share, you have a question mark. If you have low and low, you have a dog, and you need to diversify, or you need to get rid of that asset. Figure out a way to harvest it and turn it into something else. If you have low growth but high market share, you have a cash cow. What you need to do with cash cows is you need to use them to invest in coming up with the next star. This all begins with conducting a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. 2 of these are internal to the firm: strengths and weaknesses. What is it that we can do and how can we do it well? And then external: opportunities and threats. When I was in industry and I was an executive vice president for a publicly traded company, we did this a lot. What were our strengths? We were a small company, even though we were publicly traded, but we had a really good backbone. We developed learning management systems for the K-12 market. And we had an incredible backbone. We weren't flashy. That was one of our weaknesses. When we competed against Plato and Riverdeep, which were other K-12 management systems, like D2L is a learning management system that we use at UCO. It's a horrible learning management system, by the way, in my opinion. But the IT people here at UCO loved it because it was easy for them to work on. It's got a horrible interface. It's hard to figure out. It's confusing. It's hard to navigate. There are other ones that are out there. But our strength was we were cheap and we had a good, solid backbone that didn't crash, that worked across multiple platforms, including platforms that were used in places like prisons, which were still running on Linux because it wasn't external. Opportunities and threats: what's out in the market? What is our competition doing? And with that, I'm done for the day. We're finished about 15 minutes early. If you feel cheated, you let me know and we'll stay late on Thursday. Anybody want to take me up on that? Nobody ever wants to take me up on that. Education is the one service where the less you get, the happier you are. If you got ducks, come and see me. You want to take me up on that? You want to stay late? Okay. Well, you can come to my office and I'll continue to lecture you on strategies. If you got ducks, come and see me so I can give you your points.